Welcome to the Hopenning, the place where hope is happening, with your hosts Fran Cadron and Marina Theron-Monnery. For more information about Fran and Marina, or to apply to be a guest on the show, please go to our website www.hopenning.com. The Hopenning is for informal purposes only and is based on the research of your hosts, Fran and Marina. They, as well as their guests, are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from this podcast, which is not intended to replace any professional medical advice or care by medical professionals you are currently utilizing.
Welcome, everyone, to the Hopenning, the place where hope is happening. And this is episode 93. So as I welcome my beautiful co-host, Marina, who is also in the deep freeze in southern Alberta, Canada. And I am in northern Alberta, Canada at -27, feels like -37. Our beautiful guest here today, Choi of Coherent Body, is basking in palm trees and sunshine in Los Angeles, California. And I am not at all envious because we need to kill those cold bugs. Too many people are getting sick. Anyway, we are so grateful to have Sue here today. Sue is a somatic movement teacher and body worker with over 2 decades of experience creating body solutions for clients. Her goal has always been to help people make enduring and sustainable changes in their bodies that they can carry into their daily lives. And like most dedicated professionals who work with the body, she's driven to understand how mental and emotional connections show up in the body. And that is exactly what we're here for today, is to hear more about it. And our viewers, Marina and I, we really understand this in our work. So welcome, Sue, and welcome, Marina. How did you start? Oh, thank you. How did you start this journey of somatic healing and making it so important in your life?
It was for personal reasons. I think, like many people who get into this, for me, it was severe depression. And when I found myself at my worst and feeling like I was just kind of spinning my wheels with my therapist, I recognized I needed to get back in my body. I had really kind of gone out of practices of self-care. I just wasn't in a good physical condition, and I could tell the impact it had on me. So I dedicated myself just to do something every day. So it was yoga, martial arts class. Those were the 2 things that I said that I will do. And I just went through with it. And I had so many changes in terms of how I started to change things in my life instead of just talking about it or just talking about what wasn't working. I think that was probably the most frustrating thing for me, because I wanted to know, well, what might work. And the therapist really didn't have any solutions. So when I came back and, I was doing all these things that she's like, oh, wow, okay, so you got out of that bad relationship, you stopped smoking, and, you're more active. And she goes, you're going through so many changes. And she was so proud of me. And I realized it had nothing to do with anything that she helped me with. And I started to learn about why was that such a quick change? What are the mechanisms of it? At that point, it was like early 90s or late 90s. There wasn't a lot of information out there about trauma in the body. One of my first books that I purchased around that was Peter Levine's book. But then, more books came out, and obviously the seminal one, Bessel van der Kolk's book. But there are a lot of other ones, and I started to look at what things I could study in terms of body-based therapies or kind of lines of study that I could follow. And as I looked into it, I saw that there wasn't it wasn't going to be easy, and I couldn't do it on the side. For me, I really knew that I would have to immerse myself fully. So I left my corporate job, and I prepared for it, and I gave myself enough kind of time to take time off of work and invest in studying. I went to India to study yoga therapy because at that time there were only 3 yoga teacher training programs. Really, it's not anything like the landscape right now. So I did a short one. I didn't like the other 2 methodologies. And then I went to India to study yoga therapy. And I only studied yoga therapy because I was doing Ashtanga and I sustained an injury. So I couldn't study that. And, that really changed the trajectory of my studies, because I started to, it was pretty much yoga, the psychology of yoga. And that the underlying lessons I learned there really kind of feed how I interface with people. It's basically, you're meditating on the person in front of you, bringing all of your resources to serve the goal that you mutually agree upon. And then there's a buildup and then a resolution. And that's kind of the framework for a lot of, let's say, my orientation and perspective on how things heal.
So you started this in the 90s, you said, and so what is your business now? So if you tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So since then, I studied a lot of body work to learn more about anatomy and living anatomy, not just kind of dead anatomy. I went back to, took some courses and got in a community college about like biochemistry and physiology and anatomy and all that science that I didn't have in my business degree. And then it just wasn't enough. It wasn't living anatomy. So I started to do body work, and I never had a desire to do that. But it was just like I never had desire to live 5 months in India. It wasn't something on my bucket list. And I'm not really a backpacker, just take one backpack for 5 months. That's not something that I want to do for the adventure. I did it because that was the place I need to go to study. And it was the same thing with body work. I did it because this is what I need to learn to understand. And, I did a lot of different things, and I eventually kind of landed in the realm of osteopathic techniques because they really look at the body as a whole system. I'm married to an advanced rolfer, so he has that perspective, and that, we share information and learn together. And so right now I have people that I see in person, but for me, it's always been about giving people agency over the changes. Because for me, when I started doing yoga on my own for myself outside of the classroom, the relationship of me to my practice and me to my needs changed. And I always encouraged people to do that. But it was really hard within the yoga community because people like the energy of the class. They like just to kind of like almost check out and be told what to do. It's a little bit of work to kind of learn to be in your own body. And then I studied Pilates as well. And then I worked in 3 different physical therapy centers, and I started to learn about how to get people to actually follow through on things. With my private clients, they're busy people. They want something that they know will work. So I kind of challenged myself to give them the shortest amount of things. So I kind of took it always to 3 things. I'm going to show you 3 things to do. It takes under 10 minutes. You kind of have to do it. You can't not do it. And the output, the result, the change would be immediate, and they would know that it works, so they would follow through. So that's kind of how I started to work. And I always worked with people. I used to have people who would come in and I do cranial with them, other people who came in and did Pilates, and I would do movement with them. But I saw with some of the movement people, I'm like, they don't quite get it. If I put my hands on them and show them so they could feel it, they would get it faster. And my, people on the table, I'm like, yeah, they keep coming back, and it's kind of like the same song. If I show them a little movement to do, it could change. They get more empowered. So for me, it's always gone back to empowering. How can you do things for yourself to make a big change? And so that's kind of like what, now that I'm working online a lot, and the book, it's really, I've been able to deliver a really distilled program of movement and a system that kind of comes together to bring this mental, emotional piece into a body story, that makes sense. Because that's, one of the things, like if you're in a modality, you might get stuck in that modality and it becomes modality specific. Because I've studied so many different modalities, it's kind of like if you travel. When you travel, everything's like brand new and you're excited and it's like, wow, the language and the stores. But then if you travel to enough places, you see the similarities. And that's what my exposure to so many different modalities has taught me. I see the similarities, and the similarity is like you and me, we all just inhabit a body trying to navigate gravity. And how we do it, and then how we create meaning from these internal sensations, is how we face the things that are difficult, that are emotionally difficult, that you can't body yourself out of it. You have to have that top-down cognitive conscious connection to what that story is, but you have to feel the bottom-up embodied changes that are possible.
You talk about bottom up and top down, and having been able to read your book and do the exercises in the book, because there's links to videos that you created within your studio that really teach really well how to do these exercises. But what I really appreciated within the exercises themselves, they're a good workout. The exercises are a good workout. It's not really cardio at all. It's more of mindfulness within your body, and it engages the core very much so, whichever core that you're working on, but it attaches as well. And this is what makes it so fascinating for me, and for Marina, I'm sure too, is the somatic part of it, where we hold trauma. And so within your practice, what types of patterns have you seen in holding trauma within the body, and what physicality, if you were to see me, or if you were to see somebody who comes into your practice or on your screen, what do you notice about the way that people who are holding trauma in certain areas of their body hold their body?
Well, when I'm working online, it's more because you don't see the nuances as clearly. So if they're like walking in front of me, I will see, like, for instance, there's one woman, I'm like, did you wear braces when you were younger, on your legs? You could tell, because that in particular kind of stands out. You could still see it. But other things are really internal. You could kind of guess at it, but I never try to guess what their trauma is. I just want to know what's difficult for them and how can we make it easier. And then from there, things start to come out. I think with a lot of trauma, there's a real protection that you can't pry open. And so the whole idea is that instead of addressing something that's difficult because you've been kind of bumping up against it again and again, is you don't come at it directly. You instead go back to what works, you expand what works, you find what more works, and you keep building what works until you feel whole and connected. And then you meet that place again. And it's a whole different experience, because now you're not coming at it with the same old set of tools. You have many more resources. And so it almost like your resources will overwhelm the difficulty when you can do it in a specific way, and when you can do it in a body that feels empowered, that feels it has its agency. And I hear that all the time. People are like, some people know that they're frozen or they're not in their body, and they always go to their head. But there are other people who actually think they're in their body, and they realize they're not in their body. They think that they are because they feel their body or they do things with their body. But to really be present, to land in your body fully, to let your body hold you, to feel this breadth of capacity that's there, is a different experience that's hard to just kind of talk about. That's why the book includes videos. I mean, initially it was just the videos that I was delivering, and the 3 keys in particular, that first video, because it's so effective. But people needed more context about what was happening, why it was happening. They wanted to understand, why does this change so quickly? Why did I always have back pain and suddenly it's gone? When it's something is so kind of surprising, it's hard to believe or trust it, or believe that you can actually do it again, that you are in control of it and it wasn't a happenstance. So, to have the book gives a lot more context. And then that, like I said, I think I said earlier, people say it just makes sense. They get it.
So we have talked about the book without talking about the book. So please tell us about your book, When Things Stick, Untangling Your Body from Old Patterns. So tell us about it.
Yeah, so the 2 kind of key things that you learn is how to literally stand on your own 2 feet. And there's a standing meditation process that's involved with that, and how to move forward. That means move beyond your limits, beyond where you're stuck, beyond those old patterns. But there's kind of a whole process involved that is really body-based, but is also linked to your perceptions of your own in the moment body. What's coming up for you? How do you feel it? How can we dissolve it? How can we offset it with a resource, instead of just trying to change something? How do we just balance it out, and balance it out within the context of what your body knows? So our lower brain has evolved over millions of years to help us stand and walk. And there's a lot of resource within that action that we don't use, because we learn to stand up and that's it. We never revisit it. And it is just really full of a lot of variation and precision and nuance that can get you out of, on a very practical level, just get you out of pain. But once you get to that point where it becomes more familiar with you, and you know how to move and position yourself in that way, and to rest in your body in that way, it becomes a regenerative thing. Walking, I mean, there's a lot of research out there now on the benefits of walking. And I take full advantage of that in the book. And we use walking as a metaphor for getting unstuck.
You talked about the 3 keys. I think it's important for our viewers and for us to be reminded again, where are the 3 keys in the body and why are they so important?
So the 3 keys are the support centers for the major kind of weight centers in your body. So the shins, right near the ankles, I call it the shin ankles, is one place. And by shifting your weight into that place, with the other keys, something happens. The full use and access of your foot becomes available. So a lot of people will have very stiff ankles, will sit back on their heels, maybe their toes come off the ground. It's by positioning yourself in a different way and allowing the weight to pour into the arches of your feet, you are supporting yourself from the design of the body. If you're back on your heels, you're always going to feel this little bit of an anxiety of falling backwards. And there's a holding of, maybe you'll pull your head forward, maybe you round your shoulders forward, but it has an impact. But it's not just that at the feet, because we have other weight centers too. So if you just focus on one weight center, you might just stiffen up another place. So the next weight center is your pelvis. And so a lot of us are holding our pelvis together. And what you want to do is, if you're standing and you kind of take the position as if you're about to sit, it's very easy to do that. You feel the difference, and you start to learn that in combination with the shin ankles, if you kind of take that position in your pelvis, now you feel more grounded, you feel more solid, you feel like you don't have to grip. And then the other weight center is your head. So you learn how to kind of have the head in a better position so that your eyes can be open to the environment, and so that the proprioceptors, so there are things at the base of the skull that really feed your body organization system. So what we're trying to do is give the body the type of information it wants to receive to help it be stable and ready basically. And so in martial arts, for instance, you'll learn that there's something kind of very slightly different within that body of work, but I think that's one of the closest things to what you do here. But again, it's different.
So something you said that I'm quite curious about is the standing up meditation. I love to meditate. I've done walking meditations, but tell me about the standing up meditation, the significance of that.
Yeah. So one of the things that happens when you're on your feet versus sitting down is there is that difficulty of balancing on 2 feet. So it's hard, and I make it a little harder by closing your eyes. And what you end up doing is you end up getting out of the pattern of visual dominance and postural habits, and you have to organize to your internal cues for balance. And that's what you're learning to do through the movements to support yourself per the design of the body. So when you have your visual dominance, some people, and this is kind of like I'm working with someone right now, and her new glasses prescription has kind of created this vertigo that no one's been able to help her with. And it is just getting back to that center line, relieving that visual kind of distortion, and really understanding how to be in her ankles, in her pelvis, because she was so top heavy dominant that there's a lot of this sort of movement as she weight shifts instead of weight shifting from her. In martial arts, they would call it dantian, from the lower, in front of the pelvis. She was weight shifting from up here. So it's just a biomechanical thing, but the way the biomechanical ends up meeting your storyline. And if you have storylines of and distortions of self-protection or rigidity or fear or self-abnegation, all these things start to meet any sort of injury, any sort of distortion, like with the new glasses, that start to kind of create its own story, a body story that's personal to you and your circumstances and your response to events in your life. All of that happens together at the same time. You don't realize that. But when you start to get in touch with what I call it the universal body, because it's just a human body. It's not a Fran body. It's not a Marina body. It's free and liberated from those personal stories and personal meanings. And it's just a body on earth. You're just standing. But there are many different ways to do that in a way that causes strain or sends signals of insecurity or sends signals of deep walls of protection. All of these things happen without you knowing it. So when you start to learn it and know it, now these kind of occurrences become more conscious and you can respond to them deliberately.
Mm-hmm. You talked about, in the book, you talk about the bad rap, basically, that the reptile brain has been given, right? And it was fascinating for me because I tend to give the reptile brain a bad rap, but I love the way you describe that. Could you describe that for us here? About
Yeah. A lot of the talk about, like, so there's a model of the brain called the triune brain that's kind of like an older model, and most modern neuroscientists have kind of, debunked that. We look more at large scale brain networks. I mean, I'm not saying I'm a neuroscientist, but they look more at large scale brain networks and how things interact, and they understand that all of this deep lower brain function is actually like a scaffolding for clear cognition. And so the triune brain model is really like, here's the old reptilian brain, here's a midbrain, and here's the top brain, the neocortex, that controls everything. It's the CEO, it's executive, so it's in charge. Well, the stuff in the lower brain has evolved so that you don't have to bother with it. It's automated, but it could be automated under bad habits, or you can interfere with its efficient operation through fear or old memories. It's all these, it's mostly fear, because it is an unstable thing. Like if your head falls, if you fall, it cracks. That's something that your body doesn't want to do. So your body is constantly in charge of that, and it can do that very fast. And so if you imagine like you have a whole team of experts, and then you have the CEO who is good at kind of connecting all of this, but it's not good at any one of the expertise underneath it. So if that person is micromanaging each expert, it gums up the system. So a good neocortex will be able to let the lower brain do what the lower brain does well, but it can't function well if it doesn't get the signals it needs. If it doesn't have the information it needs, it can't operate as well as it could.
Mm-hmm. And as I was thinking about the book, I was thinking about, hey, that is absolutely right. Like our reptile brain responds like immediately to touch, to heat, to cold, to fear, to whatever, to protect the rest of us. The CEO as well has to be protected, right? Mm-hmm. So if it wasn't for the reptile brain, we would have burnt our hand right off before we even realized it was hot, and those types of things. So it was a good reminder again that our whole body is important, every single piece of it, and it's not just the CEO upstairs that's running the show. It's also the minute part of it that's been there a long time.
And if you just, if like any leader, like if you're the leader of your body or leader of a company, you know that the good leaders get the most out of the people that they're leading. And so that means like, what do you need to perform better? So if you think of your lower brain or just this human system trying to balance in gravity, what do you need to do your job? And so the arch needs to support the weight, not the heels. Right? The pelvis needs to be able to negotiate the gravity back upwards through the diaphragms. The head needs to be able to perceive easily all around it. When you have blinders on, when you start to kind of not have good head freedom of movement, there's a little bit of alarm that goes on. It's like, I don't know what's going on here and here, so I'm going to have to be hyper alert.
So I was just reading a little bit through some of the testimonials, and it seems as if there is really this big connection that happens between the brain, the mind, and the body, and being stuck. So how do you guide clients through that?
Yeah, so one of them is by leveraging the bipedal nature, the two halves of our body, and how the two halves come together. And so I outlined that in the book, but I kind of use this whole thing of offsetting the difficulty with the resource. And so first you need to kind of build your resources, build your skill in recognizing, acknowledging, feeling, and proliferating your resources, because the hard things, the problems are always going to signal. That's kind of their nature. They want attention, they want a solution, so they keep reminding you that they're there. It's already built in, so you don't have to build the skills to understand that. But if you build the skills to really marinate yourself in resources, you see that there are a lot of different solutions that start to come up.
So when you say
the older I got, sorry, Fran, the older I got, the more things show up in my body. And so to me, it's quite significant to read some of this and to understand a little bit of your work. So thank you for answering that.
So when you talk about resources, do you mean a certain skill set that now that I've learned about the posture, the posture stance with the 3 keys, that it's like, okay, well, maybe I just need to go back and make sure that when I'm sitting on my chair, rather than sitting in a slouch like that, that I'm actually sitting in a way that you have explained, that our gravity is being distributed correctly the way it's supposed to.
Yeah,
So
I mean, you could consider that a resource, the resource of your natural postural instincts. I mean, that's kind of a really basic one, but in terms of how we form meaning and what's meaningful to us, that's what I mean by resource. You start to be able to pay attention to what comes up in your body and how that translates into a meaningful experience. So what are the conditions in your internal atmosphere that let you know that you're joyful? What are the, when people say, oh, that feels really amazing. That doesn't say anything to the body. What is amazing? How does amazing feel in you? Amazing in you might feel like an open heart and bright eyes, but for me, it may feel like my shoulders just like are disappearing. It's so individual. And when you start to learn to articulate it out loud, actually, not just kind of bopping around in your head, when you make it concrete, then you make those resourceful moments last, because you're taking kind of like a snapshot of it. It's not, because events, anything that's organic will arise and it will fall. And that's kind of the point of insight meditation. You're just watching sensations arise and fall, and you're staying with it. Because if something arises and it feels fearful, or you're resisting it, it's going to drop back down. And so that's a resource, to be able to attenuate your attention to something that's difficult and wait and be with it at its peak. And then you feel the resolution. And that you start to understand to record the resolution. It becomes a body thing, not just like, oh, relief finally is gone. No, you start to explore the richness of the resolution. And then you do it again and again, and it happens in different ways. And you understand what resolution feels like, and you understand a change. Sometimes if you don't have the experience of that, a positive change might even feel a little frightening. But, I mean, I think you probably already know, like a lot of people feel this, is that a pain? Is that a good pain or a bad pain? You start to know, and you start to know only by having multiple experiences. So you don't know by reading a book or, what it's supposed to be. It's yours. It's highly personal, and it will change too as your
Definitely.
body changes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It reminds me of my grandfather, Sue, when he passed away in the 1970s, and he had emphysema. And he said that when he wakes up in the morning and he doesn't have any pain, he is convinced that he passed away during the night and he went to heaven. So again, the older we get, in my personal history, I've been through a little bit physically that is, even today, because of all the things that happened. I had breast cancer, and today I sit with a frozen shoulder. I sit with some remnants of that. So how would you help somebody like me?
So with that, I would help you by, like everybody, we just restore our universal body. So if you go into the book and do the elongation, and are you on my email list?
I'm not, no.
Okay. Well, if you sign up for my email
Okay.
list, or maybe Fran, you can forward I'm sorry, I haven't sent out this demo yet, but I demo someone who has shoulder issues, and we worked with the elongation and the half body stretch to change her shoulders.
Now that's perfect, because I've lost so many lymph nodes in the process.
Yeah. With scar tissue, it's a little trickier.
Yeah.
But I do have people who have, surgery, scar tissues, and they do distort things, and it may take a little longer, but and you may have to do a little different things, but you eventually get there. I have somebody who is in.
Well, I absolutely believe in movement. And I think when the movement can become so therapeutic, that it's just such a win-win. I used to be a fitness coach many years ago in a gym.
Oh, yeah.
And my boss normally said, when clients came and they were like, oh, I don't feel like being here, he had this saying, nobody comes to the gym feeling bad and leaves not feeling better.
Right.
And that's really how I feel. I went to the gym this afternoon, and it reminds me also of the book by Basil van der Kolk, The Body Keeps Score. And it sure does. And I'm pretty sure you see that a lot in your work.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what I appreciated about learning the exercises within your book I just did them in my house. It's minus whatever outside, minus 20 or minus 25, super cold. But I had gone for a run and it was cold. So I'm
Outside?
bundled. Not today, 2 days ago. And but I remembered the exercises that I had done in your book. And the exercises in your book were not running, but it was like my body remembered them. And at some point I was like, why is this feeling better than usual? And then I paid attention, right? I paid attention. Well, yeah, because when I was doing these exercises, it was the standing, just having, being aware of where your shins are and the feet are, the ankles, the shins, the pelvis, where the pelvis was, and looking out. I mean, and actually just all of that, I tend to not look out. When I'm running, I tend to look down because I've had accidents where I've tripped and stuff. And so I'm consciously looking where my feet are going. But then I remembered what you said. So Sue, that might be helpful for Marina and for our guests to know about what you say is going on in your neck when we do this too much.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I mean, the whole idea is like the body is, you should be able to operate in different positions, and with, it's not like you could never look down. It's, those sort of restrictions don't make any sense, but it's really how the body is a vehicle for you to stay connected to the earth and to be solid and secure enough that you can connect with your environment, and that the shins are kind of, and the feet are operating at a big distance, right? This big heavy thing at the top, that's a lot of leverage. And so to know that if you're down in the ankle and you move from there, and then you can allow your pelvis to support you, that alone kind of helps a lot. Just with the physicality, you feel the ease. And if you could just imagine, when you get more efficient like that, suddenly you've just freed up a ton of bandwidth. And so you're less stressed by trying to do something very fundamental as just be upright. When you can feel the pleasure and the joy of how to be supported and playful in your system, then that kind of has other effects for sure.
So there's a deep awareness that you teach of the body and noticing things in your body. And I find that quite fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. And attention. I mean, the whole kind of discussion around social media and the attention economy and how our attention is becoming fragmented is so important. And so, yeah, the book and the kind of approach is a form of attention training, that you train it on the vehicle that you're perceiving the world with. So it's not the physical body as a structure, it's the physical body as a processor. It's processing light information, it's processing sound information, it's processing gravitational pull, and all these together, that multi-sensory experience comes together to send signals that you write a story with. So if you feel unstable, it's hard for you to convince yourself that you are solid. You make things up, you do things, you compensate around in so many ways. But if you can get solid, you are authentically transmitting that level of calm and centeredness. You're not just fabricating it or, repeating things to yourself to convince yourself of it. That's the worst. When you try to convince yourself of it, but you don't embody it, there's a deep level of disingenuousness and just a conflict, internal conflict. So if you can have this consensus within your experience and within your belief and within your presentation, then that's more than anything, it makes it easier. It just makes it easier. I have a story about a friend in college, and she would tell these little white lies to her parents because they're very strict, and she would make it up, and there would be long, complex things that she'd have to patch together. I'm like, it's so hard to lie on that level, because you're constantly making up a story. You have to keep track of things. And like these stories of people who have like multiple families, right? They're cheating on their wife and they have, how do you have the time? I don't even know how you manage that. But, you know, I mean, if you are just connected, what happens is your energy, your free energy, right? Your free consciousness, your free bandwidth, you can choose where you want to put it. And that's why I have that last exercise about choice, because where you go is where you choose to go. But a lot of us actually are not choosing what we think we're choosing. So if you just, like, if you put your finger in front of your nose right now and you look at yourself, do you see two fingers?
Only until you told me to.
If I bring it really close, yes.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is because some people will only see one finger because they're looking at the finger. And I said, look at yourself, and then, you know, and it's hard because, you know, this is deliberate, right? This is in your visual field, and it's kind of, you might kind of suppress one out. But if you know that there's a finger there, but let it be in your peripheral, and you look at what you're looking at, then you start to allow that peripheral vision to exist, even though it's a little bit in the way. And, you know, because a lot of times we'll suppress things, or we'll think we're looking at something close, but we're actually kind of looking at something beyond it. You know, so that kind of consistency with your intention and the direct action of your physicality helps to clarify the story. Like, now you're not running around to try to make a story up to fit things that don't match. The things match, and they match the story. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And in the book, you had us do two fingers, right? And
yeah, it's a different exercise, but the idea is that the state of not seeing clearly is a valid state. It's not like, you know, you try to clear it up, because your body's not designed to see things that way. And when you allow your peripheral vision, for example, in that instance, to see peripherally the way it's designed to see peripherally, which is what I call indistinct. I don't like saying unclear, because then that kind of denotes that it's a deficient state. It's not. It's a state that's valid. It's a state of potential. It's a state of things that are not clear because you are not connected to it. Your intention is not there. But if your intention was something at somewhere else, that suddenly becomes clear. So the power of your intention and what you connect to make something come out from the indistinct landscape.
So, so Fran and I work very closely with people's minds and that conscious versus subconscious mind. Mm-hmm. So how do you approach that in your work?
I don't really use those terms. Some people might kind of refer to what's happening in the body and the subcortical brain as subconscious, but I don't really like to use those terms because it's just within the system. It's like, get your body to connect through the sensory system in a clear way, and then your kind of conscious thinking can clear up. I don't know. I don't like to say like your unconscious is running the show or anything like that. It's I don't like to stratify it like that. You know, old stories can be running it, but your old stories are current stories if you're running them over and over again. You know, like a persistent pain. After a while, it's no longer a pain. It's the memory of the pain. It's the fear of the pain. That, because, you know, what's organic arises and falls if you give it enough time. What's not organic seems to stay in place, but it doesn't stay in place. It's just being recreated every time. And so that can happen, I don't know, in a lot of different ways.
That's
sorry.
In so many ways, that's what we do. We talk about the story. I have a quote up here that you have from your book. You are immersed in your story, and it has many dimensions and a lot of complexity. Like any story that is well written, the journey is engaging and surprising, but ultimately satisfying because it moves forward. You are writing your story while living it. Is the journey satisfying? Can you find the connections that make a storyline? Is your story interesting to you? I mean, that we work with that every day. It's like, what do you want to hang on to? What are you trying to hang on to here? And is it really that best choice? You talk about choice in your book and how ultimately we're all responsible for making the choice of whether our story in the past defines us and is our journey that we're going to continue, or are we making a conscious, mindful choice to change the how the story ends or how the story progresses through right now?
Yeah. The limitation of that is, if your body is reacting to trauma and being re-triggered, you don't even have time to make the choice. The choice is not responding to what your body's doing. The choice is the intention that you place so that you can organize your actions and behaviors towards it. It's more like a North Star. It's not the choice of the moment of what the body does. Yeah, the whole idea is like the subcortical brain runs 1,000,000 times faster than your thinking brain. And so if you can give it the information it needs, so a traumatized body is just kind of, it's put that response down into the basement until you have better tools to deal with it. And when you have better tools to deal with it, and I present one tool in the encoding and the alternate hand tapping in the infinity resolution process, but there are a lot of different ways too that you can use it. As long as you're using body-based sensations, I think there's a lot of tools you can play with. If you're just kind of talking about concept, they don't really have an anchor in specific body events. And the specific body events for me, for an anchor of, let's say, fear. I mean, fear is such a general term, but there are different ways that it shows up for me. It's going to be a cluster of, let's say, 3 to 5 different sensations that come together to tell the fear story for me. Whereas for you, it might just be 1 or 2 sensations that really hit that for you. And that's why it's really hard to make it prescriptive. And when you work on the somatic level, it's one thing, but then you have to build it up and make sure that it has some relevance to your meaning level. That's like the middle layer. You have just the sensations, then you have the meanings, and then you have the bigger concepts in your, in a more complex form in your brain. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me because I've read the book, so I know what you mean by lower, mid, and higher levels. I would encourage everyone to get a copy of the Untangling book. I know a lot about body. I've been a runner for most of my life, and yet there were some of the things you said in that book that I did not know. And I'm from the no pain, no gain, Jane Fonda workout generation, right? And so it was like super painful, but you just pushed through on that 500th, whatever it was that we were doing in the gym that day. And now, I do have issues within my body because I did, 450 too many of the same exercise over and over and over and over. I do, and I carry that. But books like yours, it makes me mindful of, okay, I do feel that. And Marina and I have different ways that we self-talk about getting rid of pain right now. And your book only makes it more clear that, if I just need to become mindful. I need to be mindful. And it's like you said, it could be just the idea of, oh yeah, I remember that 459th stand up, chin up, whatever it was that, and I'm never going to do that to myself again. And then that creates a story in my head as I'm running. So I'm grateful for that within your book, that it just approaches it differently with the neuroscience as well as the physiology of the body, as well as the somatic stuff incorporated into all of that.
Yeah. And I do want to say that there is, especially with the way things are now, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. What is good about pushing yourself and no pain, no gain. There is value in that, in persistence, because just being overly mindful and thinking that you have to be mindful of everything, you're doing everything to learn something. And if you don't learn something, if you do it mechanically, whether it's 500 reps or feeling every sensation, it will trap you. If you're not having the experience to learn and be touched by it, to change, and you don't have a direction, you don't have an intention of where you're going, either way, you could be lost in a morass of just kind of feeling, I'm feeling this and I'm feeling that. And, you become hypersensitive, or just, what's the point?
Well, this was brilliant, Sue. Thank you so much. So your website is coherentbody.com.
Yes.
And
you can get a book from whenthingsstick.com. And you can get on my website too, and on Amazon.
Right. So, and the book's name again, if you can just repeat that for us, that would be great.
Sure. When Things Stick, Untangling Your Body from Old Patterns.
And I know it is available from your website directly as well as on Amazon?
Yes.
Perfect.
The paperback only is on Amazon. I can't sell the paperback off of my website. My website sells the ebook, so you get it as a PDF download.
I see. Yeah, perfect. And it's fascinating to read through a lot of these testimonials. I encourage everybody to look into that. And then you are also available on Facebook under Coherent Body and Instagram as coherent_body. So that is how our viewers can see you, watch you, buy your book, study everything that you can teach us, and get in touch with you. So thank you for being here so much, Sue. It was an amazing time with you, learning from you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It was fun talking to you guys.
Yeah, and the continual reminders to be mindful. Just be mindful, no matter what you're doing. It's always a good reminder. Yeah. Thanks for coming, Sue. I appreciate it. Marina appreciates it. Our viewers appreciate it.
Okay. Stay warm.
Thanks.
We will. Yeah. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. And if you like us, please subscribe, and we will bring you some more hope next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.